Scarlett, to Keir Starmer's speech yesterday in Pinewood Studios, this is supposed to reset his relationship with the British public because, frankly speaking, the polling just hasn't really looked that good. I don't think there's been a government so fresh in the job doing so badly when it comes to being on the wrong side of public opinion. Do you think he's on the right track, though? Has he made some mistakes?
So I think that there are two different ways of looking at it. So one is that number 10 has not been the most functional place since the election. But if you actually look at what the cabinet ministers are doing, they're working incredibly hard and they're getting through to places. And what his speech yesterday was about trying to say, was putting numbers, saying, we're not just going to have wishy-washy words saying, this is good, we're going to be good at education, good at health. But actually, what we need to do is we need to have some targets. And so he's started putting on the targets, which I think is a really good thing.
But he's made some extremely unpopular decisions. I mean, I don't need to rattle them all off, but I'll rattle through a few of them, shall I? One, of course, being stripping the winter fuel allowance from pensioners. We don't yet know what the dire consequences of that are going to be. I dread to think what we're going to be looking at come January or February time. We also know he's whacked a load of extra tax on employers. A lot of businesses, not just businesses, GP surgeries, hospices, saying we're going to have to get rid of staff at a point when, we need that care more than ever before. A lot of people also very sort of hostile towards the way he reacted to the riots, thinking he was particularly heavy-handed when it came to his approach, calling a lot of people in the population far right.
If you want me to comment, can we go through them slowly? So, okay. I mean, I could do the shopping list and say, yeah, that's fine, and let me talk about something else. Okay. One is the winter fuel allowance. I certainly think that, so the 10 million pensioners are affected, and we all know that about 7 million of those, frankly, don't need it. I don't think it was done particularly well. I think that there needs to be a serious safety net for the 3 million. But I certainly think when people like Nigel Farage go on about it, I mean, I hope that he always gave his winter fuel allowance back, because I actually think that we know that there were a lot of very wealthy pensioners who I think one of them used to buy cashmere. She'd use it to buy a cashmere jumper. So it was done. It was done in a rather heavy-handed way, but actually, it should always have only been for the poorest pensioners. It should never have been a universal thing. I've forgotten what was the second one.
National insurance. Let's have a look at that. A lot of businesses saying they're in trouble as a result of this.
Okay, so national insurance. Look, we all knew it was going to be a tough budget. I mean, nobody pretended it wasn't going to be a tough budget. But what's interesting is we all go, yeah, it's going to be awful, it's going to be awful. And then, of course, as soon as it's awful, we all go, but that's terrible. We knew that it was going to be...
But did it need to be awful, though?
It did need to be awful to get the money to put into public services. I mean, we all know the problem with the health service. I mean, any of us who've had to deal with the health service know just how hard they're working there and the backlog, and that actually it's got to the stage where if you can afford it and you've got an elective operation, I mean, an operation that is not urgent, then you pay for it. And that was happening more and more. And what it meant was that ended up being a two-tier country. And we can't have that. So we needed to put money into the health service. We needed to put money into education. I mean, teachers were absolutely on their knees. We had RAC, which was the crumbling concrete. So we actually have to put money into rebuilding schools. So we needed money for public services. And I'm not even talking about the problems of prisons, the problems of courts, the problems of local government. We have to have money, and that money has to come from tax. Okay, so that was it. Now, the third one was the riots. Now, what I find so interesting was that when there were riots in 2011, nobody complained when Keir Starmer, as Director of Public Prosecutions, absolutely went for the rioters. Absolutely went for them. Long jail sentences, stopped the riots by doing it. But as soon as the riots, some people, I mean, I think they were disgusting, actually, and I think people who were gathering around mosques, terrifying people, you know, were criminals, right? But it's really interesting that they decided that Keir was wrong, and of course it's right. I mean, policemen were getting really badly injured by rioters. I mean, the whole thing was going mad. So those are the three things we.
Well done, actually, Scarlett. You worked through them brilliantly well. Let's talk about balancing the books and money here, because there were a few things that one would think, if the economy is in such a dire state, you might hold off doing them rather than starting to whack so much employment tax up that businesses are going to suffer, which could lead to job losses. And especially when it comes to, you know, when GPs are saying this is going to affect them and hospices are saying this is going to affect them, this cannot be good. So perhaps they shouldn't have gone down the route of GB Energy and thrown £9 billion at that, which appears to be a bit of a sort of net zero vanity project if the economy is in such dire straits, or given pay increases to train drivers.
Okay, so the train drivers needed pay increases so that they went back to work. These we were having strikes from junior doctors, from teachers, from train drivers, from railway people, all last year, right? It had to stop. It was killing the economy. So that's what happened. As far as net zero, I mean, I think we're just going to disagree. I think it's really, really important that Britain ends up as soon as possible relying on renewables, and renewables will give us cheap energy. That it's an investment. It's not just spending money. It's an investment so that people's bills go down.
But it's an investment in where, though? Because it seems to me increasingly that it's an investment in China. They're the ones who seem to be benefiting a lot economically from our drive towards net zero, while they're not exactly cutting their carbon emissions. In fact, they're sort of emitting carbon in order to make all of the solar panels and the windmills that we're buying. And meanwhile, we're having to buy our gas from Qatar. We're spending a ludicrous amount of money, I think £192 billion in the last decade, importing fossil fuels when we could just have them and sell them ourselves to fund this transition.
The problem was that actually it doesn't make any difference where, as far as the price goes, it doesn't make any difference where we get them from. North Sea oil wasn't being given to us cheap because we were next door. It was being put on the world market and we took it at the same price. So that makes absolutely no difference. And honestly, as somebody with solar panels myself, who saves a lot on heating bills, if you start getting renewables, the price goes down. And that's what we have to do. And what we need is to be we need to make you're absolutely right, we need to make the solar panels. We need to make the wind farms. I mean, a friend of mine...
But can we do that while sort of tying ourselves to net zero targets? That's the problem, isn't it? We can't really manufacture anything. We've got the highest energy costs, I think, of any developed nation. True. So the idea that we're going to make green jobs and produce all these things ourselves is kind of for the birds. We've tied two hands behind our back in this fight.
No, we haven't. Absolutely, we haven't. That's what we're going to do. That's what GB Energy is about. Making Britain a leader in renewables, right? And it takes investment. There's no question about that. It takes investment, and we need more wind farms on land and off land. And there's a wind farm that has been a community wind farm set up on the Isle of Lewis. It's got 9 turbines. It's in the middle of nowhere. Even though it's a tiny island. But actually what it does is not only does it bring down the price for everybody, but it makes enough money by giving it to the grid that it puts money back into the community. We could do that. We could do that all over Britain if we were sensible, right? And that's what we need. And what's so terrible is one of the first things that the David Cameron government did when they got in 2010 was say, enough of this green crap, and they stopped putting, for new houses, proper insulation, solar panels, that sort of thing. And that's why we have yet more houses that need insulating. And what we need is properly insulated houses so that we actually save on bills.
So you don't have to bump off a load of pensioners this winter. Tim?
I want to say two things. First of all, and I mean this really genuinely, Scarlett, you're talking with more enthusiasm and sort of more earthiness about Labour's programme than I've heard from anyone in the Cabinet. You know, there's a real sort of... they should use you a lot more. I mean that very genuinely. Second thing, though, ultimately I agree with you. We're going to end up, as a developed economy, needing to be completely reliant on renewable energies. I agree with you on that. But it's how we get there and how quickly we get there. Because the danger, I think, with Britain at the moment being almost evangelical religious about renewable energy is we're going to embrace immature technologies, which are going to saddle us with very expensive forms of renewable energy, whereas those who wait a little bit longer, perhaps by having a better mix in the interim of gas and fossil fuels and nuclear, they will be able to get the best renewable technologies. And we have a very bad history, certainly with the nuclear industry in Britain, of backing bad, expensive technologies. And it's the religious Ed Miliband enthusiasm to sort it all out now or in the next 5 years that has ended up partly with Britain having some of the most expensive energy in the world.
There you go.
I really don't think that you can blame Ed Miliband for Britain having the most
I didn't say that.
energy in the world. I mean, he's been in power for 5 months.
I didn't say that, but it's that attitude is the problem.
Let's talk now about Sadiq Khan, shall we? Because he's mooted to be in line for a knighthood in the New Year's honours. A lot of people are sort of saying, "Wow, I'm not a big fan of that." Do you think that he should be knighted?
Yeah, I think he's done 3 terms. He will have done 3 terms of London mayor, and he's actually done an awful lot for London. I mean, for Londoners, one of the biggest things he's done is to freeze the tube fares. You know, it's incredibly expensive travelling in London. Most of us do it on public transport, and by freezing them, he's encouraged more and more people onto public transport. He's done what they call off-peak Fridays, because people were not travelling on Fridays because lots of people were staying at home, working from home on a Friday. So he's done off-peak Fridays. He has made it possible for somebody like me who gave up my car to actually just live in London on public transport, and I think that's good. He's the other thing, he's done a lot for youth services, because what we know is that is the biggest problem we've got, is what to do with our youth, because that's where, I mean, look, the crime mostly comes from young men between 18 and 25. If we look after our youth, we bring crime down.
It's out of control, isn't it? I mean, it's
not out of control in London.
No, of course it's... Scarlett is mad. I've just become totally sort of inured to the idea that people are getting stabbed every 5 seconds. It doesn't even merit a headline these days.
Come on. I mean, I'm somebody... So I travel with my bag open a lot. You have no idea how many people come up to me and go, "Your bag's open, you need to be careful."
You're lucky, Scarlett. I've been mugged twice. I had a pop-up brothel appear the other side of the street to my house, and someone was arrested outside my front door 2 days ago. I'll tell you what, Scarlett, I don't know what parts of London you're going to, but it isn't that particularly safe.
Right, so he's put 1,300 more police on the streets at a time when actually police were being cut by the government. So he is interested. I mean, he is trying his best to cut crime, right?
Trying his best.
Well, okay, so if you look at London compared to other major cities in England, let alone America, the crime rate is is there. It is not, not that, it's awful. Every stabbing is terrible, right? But actually it doesn't happen that often.
I wish that was the case, Scarlett. I really do, Tim. I mean, is this just sort of, hyperbole and people getting sort of existentially worried for no reason, or is it true? Is crime out of control in London? I
think, try and be a referee between the two of you to some extent, although I think I'm closer to you, Alex, is certain crime is under much more control than it used to be. Car crime, for example, largely because of advances in technology. And there's certain crimes that just aren't really properly recorded, that so they don't even show up in the crime statistics. You know, fare evasion, for example, on the tube seems to be at record. I always see people bursting through ticket barriers now, and no one seems to do anything about it at all. The marches that we have in London every Saturday by, you know, the anti-Israel mob, all sorts of offences are clearly taking place on those marches every week, but the police are too frightened to do anything about it. So it's partly true we are safer than we used to be in certain regards, but there's many other areas in which the police have just given up.